Hi, Lillian.
Hey, hi
How are you
Tracy.
doing? I know
I'm
I
good.
sound better than I did this morning. This morning I sounded like this and I thought, oh no, it's gonna be really bad. But here I am.
It's
Here
a
we
it's
are.
a it's a much cuter frog in your throat.
I always what somebody I worked with back in, my 20s party days. He said that he always knew when I'd been partying the night before because I came to work sounding like is it Harvey Weinstein? No, who's
No.
the it's a
Oh, it
Weinstein.
chased his name. I
It's a
don't know. It's Harvey
Weinstein.
Firestein.
Firestein, yes. This is like, and then he
Much
imitated me,
better.
good morning, everybody.
I
Anyways,
love that.
I love Harvey Firestein.
Me too.
So what are we talking about today? We
Wait,
should
I
bring up.
also have a snippet about Harvey Weinstein that I thought was funny. I saw.
Oh, cool.
So, who's the guy that played the Hobbit? Elijah Woods. So he was gossiping about the orcs, and he said that they specifically had one made in the face of Harvey Weinstein, and they never discussed it. But now that he's in jail, he's like, "Fuck that guy." And I was like, I like that Elijah Wood.
That's fair. That's fair.
We covered everything in that Firestein Weinstein moment. We're talking about eclipses. Woohoo!
We are talking about eclipses. I'm trying to get onto YouTube to see if I can make sure that there's no chats or anything going on that we need to know
Oh,
about.
good point. Good
Um,
point.
but um, yeah, honestly, I feel like I have smoked a joint. That's how my sick
Ah!
brain is operating right now, is that I've had an edible or I'm a little on the numb side. But anyways, so
Ah! Let's
today
stick
we're
with
going to
the program. Yeah.
talk about eclipses a little bit because those are coming up pretty soon. And we
Mm-hmm.
actually have a very thorough eclipse episode in our backlog if somebody wants to go check it out with the remediations that you can use for them and the more general idea of what eclipses are about, because they do have quite a mystical reputation and energy, and they are quite
Yeah.
different depending on the kind of astrology that you're looking at them from,
Mm-hmm.
um
Absolutely.
yeah. And so you can always tell, I've said this before, you can always tell when eclipse season is going to be based on where the nodes are. So right now they're in Pisces, North Node, Virgo, South Node. So we know that that's going to be earlier in the year in the Pisces time, which we had, and now in the Virgo time, Virgo Libra.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so what do we want to say? Where do we want to start with this?
Well, the notes that I had were about, I wanted to start with that physical impression of an eclipse and why they capture our attention, and also kind of use that as a way to describe the likely impact to somebody who has a conjunction versus any other transit by this eclipse. And so the experience I've heard, have you ever been in a total eclipse?
When I was a child, actually, we had a total eclipse that was happening over Canada. I think I was in grade 3, and they had the, like, welding helmet, and we all got to take our turn and go outside and look at it safely. And yeah, it's one of those core memories for sure. So that's probably my only real experience with an eclipse. Yeah, and it was
Yeah, and
memorable.
so was it the totality? I know I'm trying to get the right crowd. Yeah. So what I've heard is the animals go silent, and I've experienced that in the shadow. The light starts to dim, but that at the moment of totality, there's a change that's almost, you can't deny it. It's otherworldly. It feels really different. You described it as a core memory. And so that's a conjunction. And then any other place, like if you've heard there was an eclipse and you're like, nothing happened, that's any other transit generally, unless it's absolutely exact. And I'm happy to argue that, but that's sort of my standpoint is it has to be pretty much landing square on something to have that level of impact. So that's the first part. And then we were going to start talking about them. So September 7th is the first one. And we've said in the past in the eclipse episode we did prior, that they're connected to the south. They are associated with loss or leading. And the other note I have about that is there's still that conjunction, out of sign conjunction though, with Saturn and Neptune on the other side of the North Node. Or sorry, pardon
Do you want me
me.
to share
We
it?
made notes earlier. Yeah, would you? Because reverse it. It's a North Node eclipse. And so those are less impactful than the wild and controllable effects when you have a conjunction for the eclipse. They're still uncontrollable, but they're less negative, less loss.
Yes, I would agree with that. Um, and yeah, I mean, both, I mean, it's tricky, right? I've seen a lot of people on social media who are like, oh, fear mongering of astrologers. Like, that seems to be a real theme in the past couple of weeks on social media about it. And it's like this being a North Node eclipse and being more about bringing in, it's like that can be not great as well. And maybe not as negative as we perceive loss to
Right.
be, but bringing in too much of something that you can't
Mm-hmm.
control is not great either. I mean, it's a similar principle as we think about Jupiter, when it's like you can have too much of something and therefore, Jupiter can bring its own kinds of problems. But it's in our culture, everything is we seem to be attracted to too much. Like, people don't fear too much in the same way as they fear loss, right? So there's this interesting perception around the difference between the
Yeah.
two, the North Node versus the South Node. I'm back. Yeah, for sure. Did you want me to share the chart for people to see, or did we just want to share that in the comments?
Yeah. Yeah,
Share
that's a great
it.
idea. Oh yeah, yeah. Let's give it a little share. We'll take a look at it. Okay.
There it is.
Thank you for doing this, Tracy.
And so I did this time, I
Yeah.
was smart enough to circle the things. So at the top, we've got the sun in Virgo is conjunct the south node. And to me, I mean, we do have a conjunction
Mm-hmm.
to the south node, and it brings an important
Right?
part of the story, because to me, there's a release of ego if you have the sun with the
Yes.
south node, a release of any kind of attachment to the negative side of the sun, right?
Yeah, and with the ruler right there, it is
Mm.
an opportunity to look at something with a really different perspective. Yeah, to let go of a perspective that maybe isn't helpful.
And maybe because we're talking about Virgo and Mercury's in its own sign of Virgo, maybe letting go of perfectionist tendencies that might get in the way. Is that fair to say?
Interesting. I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah, that's good.
And then now, what makes me nervous about that moon at the bottom with the North Node is that Pisces already doesn't have limits.
Right.
So to have the North Node there amplifying that, and then if you notice, you have Jupiter in Cancer that's trining that, that's
Ah, there it is.
a
Yeah.
lot of um, lack of boundaries. Also, spiritual inspiration. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's beautiful energy. But if we look at it from too much, what might that represent?
When we discussed this before, and I mentioned how sometimes the way that we get through things is through repairing them after the damage has been done. And with the Saturn hanging there in the later degrees, and because I'm such a watery person, I feel like there's an opportunity to like call out to that Saturn for structure and use that kind of, I know Saturn's not super happy, I know it's in retrograde, but that really delicate, unique, stamped to yourself design to get you through, knowing that it's coming after, and that's the point. So if there's a lot coming, what I generally advise clients to do is try not to react, or have a safe space to react in, and then look after the event to see what it is that you can derive the benefit of.
I like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that a lot. I think that some of the themes that came up during Saturn and Pisces that we heard a lot about was, around boundaries and releasing boundaries and kind of figuring out where they need to be reinforced and where you can let them go, but also time and how wonky
Mm-hmm.
time felt through the entire Saturn and
Yes.
Pisces thing. And so I love that that Saturn at 29 degrees is there because it's just popped back in, right? And so it is
Yeah.
honestly a little bit of protection from the too much that might happen from the moon and the north node and the Jupiter. Um, but it's like it feels like this final opportunity of
Mm.
something around that
Yeah.
Saturn and Pisces, around Pisces, maybe around healing, maybe around um, revisiting. I mean, we're all in such a place in terms of either fortifying our ideologies or re-examining our
Mm-hmm.
ideologies. And so that's going to be part of the
Mm-hmm.
story just because, Jupiter is so involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It feels like we're going to gain some kind of flexibility is
Mm.
my sense of it, and
Mm.
maybe that the Virgo energy, the release of that is the maybe the details that people are hanging on to that aren't really helpful or aren't really adding to the
Right.
story,
Right. Right.
and
I find in my Swedish death cleaning, I have to be more and more rigorous because things want to stick around. Very strange.
oh, that is interesting, like almost like a clinging.
Almost. I saw an article the other day or yesterday about the onslaught of furniture from older generations to younger generations, when the younger generations are just going to go get some press board and, use what they need for what they have. And that is part of the vibe. There's this tremendous shift, I feel, of the boomers, even though I back right up against them time wise, where there's an excess that's coming to us. And like you said, sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good.
Oh, I like that take. Yeah, for sure. Definitely some hanging on to, yeah, some excess that got put on us. So that to me
Mm-hmm.
really speaks to that Saturn and Pisces where, what's holding you back that you don't need anymore, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
physicality of the Saturn, what kind of things might you be able to get rid of that aren't actually helping you move forward? I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it.
yeah. Especially with the Neptune moving into sticking around in Aries, rather, because that takes the onus off of the Saturn. I think when Neptune was in Pisces and Saturn was in Pisces, there was no end to the depth. Yikes! Gives me a real what was that one? Ocean Gate, the guy with the submersible, and he ran it with joysticks and stuff, and he was tackling the great mysteries of the underwater world, and then
Hmm. The other thing that popped
that's
into my
what
mind as
that's
soon
what.
as you started talking about somebody wealthy doing weird things, I
Mm-hmm.
my brain went for some reason to the guy who owns Meta. I'm not going to say any names. Just
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
company just got in trouble for using women's cycle data from that cycle app. Meta has been taking that data. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I didn't. The one I heard about yesterday was the specific chat AI in Facebook is allowed to draw children into sexual discussions. And they have delineations that are useless. Um, and they had examples that they had been through that allowed, I mean, it doesn't make any sense unless you think of children as a market. Um, but yeah, I hadn't heard about that, but I'm not surprised We are over surveilled at this point. And just like with everything else in tech, sometimes that means there's a bunch of intelligence and what is it, Robert Downey Jr. shifting screens around. And sometimes it's 700 people answering chatbot in India representing AI. Speaking of chatbot, and I'm not responding to all the scandals just because we don't have that much time. But speaking of AI, the shift from Chat GPT 4.0 to 5 was. Have you had any interactions with it yet?
I haven't upgraded mine, so no, I haven't played with it yet at all. Yeah.
That's so smart. So the people I've heard who use it for work are outraged because the structures that they put into place with the more friendly persona led to different results and outcomes. And those were outcomes they were relying on for their job. And so they basically just yoinked a bunch of code. So I don't use it like that. I don't understand it like that. But this AI stuff is wild. It's just wild.
Well, and I don't know how you felt, but when all the rich guys went and hung out with your president at the beginning of the mess that started in the fall, I mean, I was already sort of thinking Meta run, run away. Like of all of the AI situations, of all of the data, of everything, for some reason that one is the one that made me the most nervous. And likely because, to be fair, Instagram and Facebook have been the two places where I've been threatened. Right. Like I had my
Right.
personal Instagram was taken over a long time ago. I never got it back. My Meta business account got hacked last year when I tried to place an ad. So, like, I just don't trust Meta because of
Right.
personal experience, not because
Yeah.
of any kind of, anything else. Beyond that, the owner has proved to not really have a lot of ethics or care for people. So, it's a
Right.
play
Right.
yeah, it's just a platform that totally freaks me out. And so those are places I stay away from AI. You know, I don't wanna have any kind of conversation with Meta
That makes
AI
sense.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I
No,
try
and
really
and
hard
I
with
hadn't thought.
ChatGPT. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say you're supposed to get online 13 and above and have supervision. And as a result, there's not supposed to be advertising for you. And then that 13 to 18 is supposed to be gated, whatever. I remember when my niece, who is now in her 40s, um, opened her Hotmail, turned around and deleted everything because there was just going to be too much porn in it. And she would use it like text because she couldn't rely on it for incoming mail if she wasn't right there because it would just be filled with weird spam ads. And I feel pretty confident at this point we should have nipped that in the bud. There shouldn't be any spam. There shouldn't be any bots. There shouldn't be any of this data collection or data markets. And it's unfortunate that we didn't. But yeah, I don't know what the president's doing on the 7th or what the premiers are doing or what the leaders of countries are doing on the 7th. I don't know what's coming next. Um, so that's about all I can say about that one. And then the next one, later in the month, I'm excited to talk about the Cardinal Cross. We've got a guest coming up who'll be discussing that. But this is September 21st, and it's a partial um, solar eclipse. And it's also equinox, which is very interesting because equinox is, there it is, thanks, is when we celebrate the harvest and when we acknowledge what we've done with the year and we have a big feast, that kind of thing. And it's also when you can spin the egg and have it roll for the longest amount of time. And um, right now we'll have an eclipse on that. So we can expect the unexpected for the one of the 8 Sabbaths of the year.
Mhm. Well, and this to me, I mean, the September 7th eclipse is more potent just in terms of how close
Right.
the sun and moon are to the nodes. But this
Mm-hmm.
particular chart, the sun and the moon at 29, Saturn at 28, and Mars at 29, Neptune's at 0. Like, this is a transition chart.
Yeah.
um this is something's about to shift, something big is going to change. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't quite know what that looks like, when we have so many things that are just changing signs or just changed.
Right.
There's still a
Yeah.
waiting period of what this is going to bring, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
Mars
It's
into Scorpio is
6 months,
always a big
isn't it?
shift. 6
Mm-hmm.
months. What do you mean by 6 months?
Oh, I heard in general that the effects of an eclipse it is revealed after 6 months. You're sort of waiting for that other bit of information to come. So we may not see these results for 6 months.
That's true. That's true. And to be fair, I did not go back and look to see what these connect with, like the families that they're in, the eclipse families that they're in, or
Right.
which cycle they
Right.
connect to. Which I'll explore that in my newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
That'll come out closer to,
Mm-hmm.
but give a little bit more
Right.
detail and see. I don't know if these are older eclipse families or not. I'm not even sure,
Yep. I think
but
that's okay.
both portend change. I love what you said, Lillian, about the harvest and bringing things in, because there is with the Virgo. Anytime we're looking at Virgo Pisces, there's an abundant scarcity piece to that,
Mm.
because one side
Yeah.
knows no bounds, and Pisces energy is always gonna err to the too generous side of things, and Virgo energy is always going to be efficient, and it's going to be, I hate to say miserly, but I can't think of a better word right now. But it definitely sticks to less and efficient, and
Yeah.
to keeping things, trying to keep things simple. I don't know that Virgo is always that great at it, but the goal or the desire is to simplify for sure. So we're going to see things around that, too much versus not enough, which is such a huge part of what we're dealing with, and especially what you guys are dealing with in the States right now. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's all just gonna get
Absolutely.
really highlighted, right?
Absolutely. And the harvest of this administration could be the thing that gets affected. And then we'll see that as it rolls out. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's almost like the Play-Doh we're working with is plenty, and then we're like picking off little pieces. Not so much plenty, not so much plenty, but big change, very big change. Do you want to
Mhm.
slide into the next topic? Do you
Let's
feel
do
like?
it. Let's do it. Let's get into trouble. That's the plan, is to get into trouble. So actually, before we
Yeah,
move on,
exactly.
because I don't want to false
Yeah,
advertise, we did talk a little bit
right.
about, I mentioned purpose in the chart. And so I just want to
Yes.
talk about how that even came up and why that's, part of the name of the thing.
Yeah.
So when Lillian and I were talking about what to do on the show today, she brought up, and I'm not going to give this enough credit or say it right, but wanting to look at um, um, culty sort of people who are very conservative versus not. And then sort of there are people who are conservative for the sake of being conservative. And there are some people who like it's their mission to do something about
Mm-hmm.
it. Is that what you
Yeah.
meant by purpose when we were talking about it, and what the difference
Yeah.
is? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Woohoo.
Yeah, you did it. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
great.
I know the topic is vast and promotes a lot of reaction. So I was kind of trying to diffuse it, which is not my forte. So we'll see what happened. But the two things I kind of looked at were other articles that describe signs as political or not political. So I thought we'd kind of go through some of those. And then I saw a 2020 article by Archie Dunlap, and his proposal is that as astrologers, we are conservatives. And that reminded me of a recent video that Andy did, Andy Garris from Moira Press, on, is astrology identity politics? So rather than go through all of those, we'll kind of touch into these two pieces. And so I kind of want to do the first one or sorry, the second one first, Archie Dunlop. So in January 2020, is that cool with you? And then I'll do the list. In January 2020, he wrote that, in summary, pardon me, can astrologers be conservative? I think he's located in the UK, but he was looking at the USA. And he was saying, if you think about liberal principles, he went through a whole bunch of them. I wonder if I took a picture of them. I'll try to describe them, but as with any language, they're all kind of coded, so it felt a little coded. Man-made climate change, he ascribed to liberals, wanting to help people. Um, there was a robust list of what I would define as political topics. And then the summary that he had was that, oh, I don't want to, let me try again. Can astrologers be conservative? So he went through all of the different topics that he felt were liberal topics. And he said, you could absolutely make an argument that in this time of rainbows, astrologers are also ascribing astrology to fit any diverse experience. Um, and then he said that because astrology, the nut of astrology is that it shows you the hands that were dealt to you by God, that it's not up for debate whether or not you've got these aspects or these aspects. It is a conservative role to present to your client what your hand is. And I'll stop it there. The other thing that he said, if you're an astrologer, you're probably conservative, he said. And then he wrote, unless you are overly optimistic and believe in really good outcomes, then you might be a liberal astrologer. So I'll stop it there with regard to his article. But the things I wanted to pick out from that were actually from the tail end. And I'll take a tangent to say there's a brain scientist who kept having strokes, and she was able to remain conscious during the strokes. And she had enough of them to realize I'm competing with the baby frog in your throat. That when she was in a stroke phase, everything was connected. She felt very safe. The world was beautiful. And that she would come out of that phase into a medical circumstance that was the aftermath, that was terrifying, strictly adhered to, felt very Saturnian to me. And her experience with the stroke felt very vegetarian to me. So rather than kind of tussle through any targeted ideologies, I would rather find where we conserve and then where we give generously, right? As a basis for that, because I thought, and I guess this is what it comes to, I thought conservatism was preserving traditional values. They could be based on the Bible. They most likely are based on the Bible. Maybe Calvinist even, because there's a big push for success. This is obviously a very narrowly Christian sort of thing. I genuinely am not trying to think through every other culture, but he did point out in his article, did Archie, that is there a problem with religion and astrology? And he pointed to the astrologers in India as a very religious culture, very traditional culture, and you will absolutely be guided by astrology in your lifetime. And then he said, even the Islamic folks who don't practice astrology, and I will say in the Quran there's a note that says, because God is so good, you don't have to practice astrology. And I thought that was such an excellent nod to both religion and astrology that I really found captivating. First, he brings up Al-Biruni, and then he brings up William Lilly's most famous home, Christian astrology. So that's one component I wanted to touch into, Jupiter and Saturn. But there's another one, and I think this one is, I'm finding it really compelling the further I go on the inquiry. Nothing is static. And when we describe people as one thing or another, we're using static descriptions. And I appreciate that already detailed some explanations or ways people would vote. But I feel like the combination of, I would do this shorthand. Saturn is conservative. I would say Virgo is conservative in terms of like the energy of it. Um, I would maybe expand that to earth and water in a much more general way. Um, there are signs that are more inclined to stick to what they do. I think those are also the earth signs, and that would be in Taurus. Um, so I'm looking for that conservative nature. And then the liberal nature, I don't know where to put that in astrology.
Well, I'm going to just jump in because I don't know that
Yeah.
I don't I have 17 things going on at the same time. Somebody has said something in the chat and I can't read it because Norton decided right now it should put a warning on my screen that I can't close, which is right in front of the chat. So if you could go in the bot, like put and open the chat, see what they're asking, that would be awesome. I don't know if,
Yes,
I don't know.
I'm in
I
there.
guess we kind of have to back up and see how are you defining conservatism? Because I would agree Virgo is
Right.
conservative if we're talking about conserving, but Virgo's mutable. So it is not going to want to
Yes.
stay still. So, I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to describe. So I would say that signs are not the best way to pick out conservatism, although in my own small circle of people, the people who are most nailed down in their ideas and like immovable are Scorpio, Taurus. That's just in my small, like when I look at the people who
Wow.
are the most vocal on social media, the most immovable in terms of their ideas, and not really open to discussion, tend to go out and find the information that proves their argument, never really interested in growing or learning. That is pretty consistent in my circle, but that just could be who I have in my life. So there's nothing scientific about that. It's just something that I've noticed. And then when we have, I mean, because Jupiter is going to have the ideology. And so Jupiter can be just as troublesome when it comes to whether conservative or doesn't matter. Anybody who's like zealot about it that's a Jupiter thing, because it wants everything to expand, including the ideas that it thinks
Yeah.
is right, you know?
Yeah.
So, and Jupiter also, then, if we're talking Pisces, wants to go and teach lessons as Sam. So, I love that he taught us that. That's just such an important piece of that Pisces. So, I mean, conservatism, until you actually know what your definition of conservatism is, it's a tricky conversation. But whether astrologers are conservative or not, I have to say, when I was introduced into the astrology world, which was much later than you were, because you were, already in helping with Norway and doing this stuff long before I ever came along. And I'm going to say I'm liberal. I mean, I feel like everybody deserves the same opportunities, and the system really fucked up and broken. And I want I would rather live in a socialist, any day to capitalist at this point in history. That's me. So let's get that out in the open. So when I went to my first
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
astrology event, I assumed open-minded, liberal, progressive, and was kind of shocked at some of the people that I met where that was not the case even a little bit. And that became more and more obvious the more events that I went to and the more people that I met. And there seems to be a really solid divide in terms of progressive versus conservative. And I mean, because astrology over history has been like marginalized beyond marginalized to the point of killing people, right? To to be conservative with that history is just kind of weird to me. Like I don't even quite understand how that happens in a brain. But we then, to his point, I don't think you could ever see growth of Hellenistic astrology like you've seen it without conservative mindset because that's very strict rules. There's like no deviation. And we see it in the way that they fight online and defend their practice. There's like, that's a pretty
Yeah,
fixed methodology,
yeah.
you know, and it's grown and attracted, that more sort of like fixed. I mean, instead of conservative, I'm going to say fixed because it's that's how it's built.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. You don't, oh, there you go. You're delayed. I'm like, oh, I can't hear you. I'm like, no, I can't. It's just after.
We're
Yeah. But so,
we
I mean,
are both
everybody's going to give
delayed.
Capricorn the, the conservative kind of thing. Um, I think Saturn, because it rules Aquarius and Capricorn, people assume that that's where conservatism lives, but I don't believe that. I don't believe it at all. I think Venus, because Venus wants what she wants. And I think the Venus ruled signs can be just as stuck, for fear of not getting what they want, you know, and especially like when we look at this current
Hmm.
conservative movement globally, it is all about money. And so that's Venus doing her thing for sure.
Yeah,
You know. So I mean they all play a part and the
yeah,
whole, Mercury comes along and helps the misinformation spread and helps the BS spread
yeah.
and
Let's pause on Mercury. I just got the chat, and Lori asked, "Does Mercury have influence on whether or not someone's progressive?" So I just wanted to chime in. I
oh
think
cool.
yes, Mercury's wily.
Well, it's the beauty of birth charts, right? It's like, it's interesting 'cause I have gone and looked at some of these politicians' birth charts. Actually, what I was more curious recently in looking at was this idea of lying and misinformation and what's happening in the charts of those that are really, really good at that. And that's
Mm,
a Mercury and Neptune story, period.
yeah.
And so yes, Mercury can play a part. Mercury is going to allow the message of conservatism to go out. And I feel like what's interesting is that fixed Mercury, we're not going to see the fixed Mercury publicly because it's the dexterous
Right.
Mercuries that go out there and can spin is who we see in the front, right? So, but ours, like the
That's
initial
right.
movement of conservatism in Canada to where we are now, which started, quite a while ago, that was all very Tory and then he sent out a bunch of mercurials to spread the word, so it's fascinating to watch. I mean, it all works together and they all
Oh,
play their part.
oh, it really does. And for us, part of what I'm trying to get to and why I was being so vague is there's a shift, right? The current president was a Democrat until he ran for office. And I mentioned in previous conversation where I was trying to find out about like revolutionaries, right? Like Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua was a revolutionary and is not one now, and there were other examples through history. I was going to comment on conservatism in astrology, much like art, is was the provenance of courts and kings. It was part of that dressing of the traditional court. And so, in that regard, I think there's a very precious sense of being a conservative relayer of truth and coming too with a conservative idea that's rich, right? Like that is ensconced. And I think that that happens a lot. I know I've mentioned it before. I haven't tracked it down because it would just make me so cross, and I can't talk when I'm so cross. But Steve Bannon is supposed to be a studier of the occult. And just thinking about him looking at these same charts and going, we can be more deceptive. Look at that. Be more aggressive. Go get him. Who's got Mercury in Aries? I want you to go deliver this message on this day. I can just imagine folks trying to use it for ill when I assume most astrologers are trying to use it to benefit their clients. And the places, when you mention money, the current, I have no idea where astrologers land, conservative or liberal, but the financial astrologers, I would assume, are largely conservative because they are going out to get money and using astrology to get money. So I wanted to comment on those two things. But the lack of linearity, the fact that it can change, is what I was another piece I'm trying to get to. So I think we're creating these strong personalities, right, that are advocating for strong results. But the tipping point, we don't know where that is, that will flip you over to some other adversarial role, to the role you played previously. And that is another part I find fascinating and that is relevant for eclipse season, is people changing sides.
Right. Well, and we see that definitely, when we talk about the current president, his, mutability for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
just his chart is very ruled by mutable signs. And so that's the thing about mutability, is it can change just for its needs, right? And so that definitely can play a part when we see these people who can't pick a party, can't pick a road, can't pick a whatever. Not that they can't, it's that their goals change. The goals stayed the same and who they needed to partner with changed. Mutable people will adapt. It's just the way it is. But I think we have to figure out, like, is somebody fiscally conservative? Is somebody ideologically conservative? Are they not conservative at all? They're just afraid of people who are different. And it really has nothing to do with any kind of ideology.
I'm actually I'm actually going to recommend that we shift to the other article now, because those questions, I want to sit with them. And I really want to think about this stuff. But the other article I read that I thought was fun was, which signs are most likely to be liberal? And you've already kind of spoken to the Virgo, but I wanted to run through them kind of one at a time to see what you think. So I'm going to grab the article. So the number one liberal sign is Aquarius. And I was all, no, it's not. Not at all. And I wanted to know what you thought. So why don't you think Aquarius is a sure-footed liberal sign?
I love Aquarians. I love you all. Please don't hate me. Don't come at me. If I'm going to say
Me
this, I'm going to
too.
be really honest. And this is not signology. This is about the sign of Aquarius, period. Traditionally, it is ruled by Saturn. It's a fixed sign. So it does not change. It's not flexible. And it has very strict rules around what it expects and what it's going for and what it wants. That is going to change from person to person based on the rest of the chart. So Aquarius by nature is not liberal because it is fixed and it is traditionally ruled by Saturn. I don't necessarily, if you want to use modern rulership, I don't think Uranus is particularly liberal, because
That's
I don't think
Uranus is like
liberal
the
and autonomy
mixer.
are the same thing necessarily.
I agree. I agree. Okay, next song is Virgo. No, Aries, liberal. And the note I love what they wrote. I'm not going to attack the writer. I'm using it. I thank them for writing it. But Aries as liberal, I don't understand where that would come from. I get the fire, I get the passion, and I kind of wish they'd stick with who's the most political, because in a way I could see Aquarius being political, no matter what side they're on, because they're group oriented, right? For the same reason, I don't necessarily see Aries doing anything for anyone politically, because I can't imagine anything being more boring. And I almost want to look at the signs. The sun signs are heavy Aquarius, Aries, because I would be fascinated to see. Like, the first person who jumps to mind was the former wrestler that was on Saturday Night Live that became a senator that got kicked out for doing like a groping pig or something. And maybe he's Aries, I'll go check. But I can't imagine them sustaining a political interest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Aries is, so here's the problem. It sounds to me like they're conflating liberal with libertarian, and those are not the same thing. I would say Aries and Aquarius both fall on the libertarian side of the spectrum, not under liberal, right? I don't know.
I
I'm not
love that.
like, and this is also
Mm-hmm.
whenever you get into the political conversation, especially with, because America is a two-party, and so like it's like there's conservatism and that's everything else. There's like, and very little knowledge on what the rest of the spectrum looks like.
Yeah.
And so, you've got libertarian, you have uh, liberal, you have socialist, you have, like there's a whole bunch of things that fall on that side. And so I think it depends on how they're defining
That's
it.
right.
So if we're going to talk libertarian, I would say
Small,
100% Aries and Aquarius for sure.
yeah. I find that fascinating. So then the next one, Sagittarius, absolutely libertarian. Yeah. Whatever Sagittarius wants is the best politics. And if that changes, so do the politics.
Yeah, well, that's just tricky, right? Because it's mutable. Let's remember it's mutable. And so whatever it needs at the moment is going to shift depending on where they are in their life. And so I think Sagittarius can be whatever it needs to be based on, when it is and where they land ideologically. And so the mutable signs, we could have endless conversations because it's going to depend so much on the rest of what else is going on in the chart as a sign. Sagittarius is libertarian. I don't see it as conservative, but I can see it being at any point in the spectrum from the middle, depending on what else is going on, because it needs to share ideas. So if there's any politics that are trying to control, like Sag is not going to put up with book banning. It's not, anytime you are trying to hide information or suppress people's ability to come to their own decision when it comes to their ideology, Sagittarius is never going to be for that at all, right? That is the one thing that'll be consistent and not going to vary. Yeah.
I agree.
And
So
then, yeah.
their list goes on, and the way that it goes on, I don't think is fruitful for us. Let's take a different angle, if that's okay. I think that the organizers of society do come from earth and water places. And I think the disruptors or the discombobulators of society come from fire and air places. What do you think about that?
I think that's really a fascinating take on it for sure. Yeah, and then you could take it a step further and say the fixed signs are motivated to keep things the same. The cardinal signs are motivated to move us forward, and the mutable signs are just going to adapt and do whatever needs to happen for them to survive and hopefully thrive. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different ways. I want to know who did they think was the least
Here we go.
conservative or liberal? I don't remember what the scale was measuring.
So it was liberal to conservative. And so naturally, they conclude with Capricorn.
Is the most conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree.
I would Pisces far down on the list. which is
I
fascinating.
would I would leg wrestle anybody over which one is more conservative, Capricorn or Aquarius. And I would say
I
Aquarius
agree.
all the way. All because it's fixed. It's fixed.
Yeah,
Cardinal needs
yeah.
to move forward. It needs change. You know, it wants to
I
control the
love that.
change, right? It wants to
Yeah,
control the growth and the movement and the direction of it. But
right.
stagnant is not anything Capricorn is interested in. In staying the same, Capricorn wants growth and direction. So, no,
That is fair.
I would put under conservative, I'd put all the fixed signs under
Yeah,
conservative because they don't
yeah.
want change. They don't want things to move forward and evolve.
Yeah, the
You
only
know,
one
it,
we didn't mention was Leo, and that totally makes sense. You'd want your kingdom, so you absolutely understand conservatism.
yep,
You will conserve your rulership. Yeah.
yep. Yeah, they want to keep their image stable. They want to keep everything stable, right? How they present themselves, their kingdom, all of that. They want stability in that. They want to they want predictability. The fixed signs want predictability. So maybe that's where the first article is coming from with
Neat.
astrologers
Yeah,
and conservatism, right? Because that
that
connection
would make
between wanting to
sense.
predict and fixed wanting to be able, so maybe that's where that whole idea came from, you know?
I mean, there are arguments to be made. It to me just pointed out like it you know how in music you want to hear the theme? I didn't hear it. I didn't hear here's the conservative offering or here's the liberal offering. So I heard it suggest stuff, but to me, I feel like there's and it gets trapped in binaries, and I'm guessing that's because I'm from the United States. Because with proportional government, there is a really different view, and may it come down onto our country ASAP. But the I think of the releasing of things as letting go as liberal. I don't know why, right? But like if there's stuff leaking out, there's liberal. If there's stuff getting formed, it's conservative. And that's just because of the nature of it. And then I think, oh boy, we're screwed because nothing stays the same. It always goes in a circle. That's why they call it a revolution. But what is underneath that that helps inform people where they want to go? I mean, to conclude on the conservative tip, Ronald Reagan was known to have an astrologer on staff, or at least Nancy. And I would argue that quite a lot of folks who are um, authoritarian or conservative towards authoritarian would gladly use every liberal in the world to share their message if it made it possible for them to do the next thing. And the experiences I've had with that working in media are the real let go of ethics, the real corruption that's available on the lowest level versus the journalists who are trying to share information with people, right? Like it's just such a stark thing. And I'll give you a second example. There was a radio show that I heard that was in the early days of the internet where there was a millionaire who wanted to listen to news from Rush Limbaugh, wanted to listen to adult comedy, and wanted to listen to what was the other sports. And so I kind of feel like in the realm of where we're at now, there are the entertaining portions that may look or be liberal facing. I don't know how to say, or generous facing. And then you find out, nope, they're working for the king. You know, nope, they're working for the authorities. So I'm curious to keep mulling around that. I don't feel like we got anywhere really, but I didn't intend to with this
Right.
one. You know,
Right. Well,
yeah.
and I just had a brain fart
Mm-hmm.
rereading Lori's comment now that I can actually see what's there. Um I would say how Mercury plays into this whole idea of liberalism versus conservatism is that it allows to spread the message, but also you can have people who have quite conservative ways of thinking. You see a Mercury in Capricorn or a Mercury in Cancer can be quite conservative in the way they process their information, but it's going to depend, right, what Jupiter is doing and if it's got more of a a socialist edge to it, or if it's talking to, say, Pluto or one of the outer planets, which
Right.
tends to automatically make you think a little bit more about the collective in a different way when you've got personal aspects to those outer planets. So yeah, so I think it definitely will influence how people take in information and process information and
Mm-hmm.
disseminate it for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
part of the story. But yeah, there's the Jupiter and the Saturn and those other planets tend to give the final punctuation on that sentence in personality, anyways.
Oh, beautifully said. That's beautifully said.
So I did, before we go on off of here, I did want to mention how we actually got here
Mm-hmm.
in our discussion to talk about this today, because I
I
do
like that.
really want to, I further want to explore this idea around cults and the
Mm-hmm.
and cult leaders and cult followers and what's happening in the chart when you
Mm-hmm.
look at that. And it was born out of the documentary Shiny Happy People. Actually, it was born far before that. I've actually had an obsession with this for quite a while, but that was
Mm-hmm.
because that story is about the Duggar family and their
Mm-hmm.
religious affiliations, and then now the political affiliations that that religious organization has created. And so
Yes.
I did go take a look, and I have noticed. So Scorpio is
Mm-hmm.
often a sign that we see a lot with cult leaders strong in their chart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I laughed when I brought up what
Mm-hmm.
is his name? Bill Goddard is
Yeah.
the leader's name, and November 2nd. So as soon as I saw his birth date and it's a Scorpio, I just laughed because I was like, yeah, so that is definitely a thread. So this we will revisit this topic if you're interested
Yeah.
in talking about it. And I'd
I
love to dig
do.
in more.
Yeah, I'd love
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah, and
absolutely.
thank you for entertaining the left and the right. I'm not trying to dilute the topic. It just feels like we've gone so far afield, and there is a real authoritarian thump still happening all around the world, and so just trying to figure out where to address that and
Well,
how
and
it
it's
looks.
almost like that's such a good point, and it's almost like that the Pluto meeting with Saturn and Capricorn just sort of
Yeah.
amplified that authoritarian voice in a way that I feel like astrologers um downplayed in a possibility, like there
Mm-hmm.
was so much more focus on the coming down of the structures, and
Yeah.
a lot less focus on what that creates, and what kind of authoritarianism we could be looking at. So I mean,
That's
I know where we are in history right now is far beyond anything I could have imagined. Yeah, it's just bizarre.
it irritates me because I just wanted to work. I didn't want to look at politics. So this pisses me off. But, if we can get us back to the right timeline, I'm good with that. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I also was thinking maybe I'd reach out to Archie or I would just listen out because I don't want to lose out on some of these opportunities to do cross pollination and get better understanding.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, listen, to write articles about astrology that a lot of people are going to read is so, I mean, you got to make it interesting enough for the masses and simple enough for
Yeah.
people to, so no disparaging at all of,
No,
and
no,
of
no.
course, we all come at this from such different places, and the things that we key into in a chart is going to be the thing that we resonate with the most. So, I mean,
Yeah.
anybody who thinks that as an astrologer, they're purely objective,
It's
good
not
luck with that.
happening.
Like some are
Yeah.
going to be more good at that than others, but nobody is going to be perfect at it. That's for sure.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
So should we talk about, so next week we're going to have a guest, our
Yeah,
friend
that's
Donna
right.
Young, who's the president of Kepler College, Astrology College, is going to come and talk to us about education and astrology. They have their fall session opens, it's open now and it'll start in September. And they have, I was just looking, I get the newsletter and I follow them on social
Yeah, so
media.
do I.
There's some
Yeah.
great offerings coming up in that fall schedule for sure. So I'm excited to be talking to her. Plus, she's just a riot, so it'll be fun.
Oh, yeah. I'm super psyched. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you all for
Excellent.
joining. Really exciting.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody that stopped by and everybody watching. And we will see you next week. Maybe if I could figure out how to do this over here.
Yeah, maybe we'll just stick around. How about
Yeah,
that?
we're just gonna play. Yep. Maybe. There we go. Oh, it's going to do it